NEK-TV Rocks, and my guests today are
Leann Kimmons.
Russell Hinton.
and we're going to be talking about the Guardian Ad Litem program. What is that?
The Guardian Ad Litem program, it's a totally volunteer program. Guardians Ad Litem in Vermont are people who are appointed by the court to advocate for the child's best interest. And these are in cases where a child has been brought into the court system either because of abuse, neglect, sometimes truancy, or if the child is outside the control of their parent. There are other cases where a guardian ad litem, or we call them GALs, or gals, or guardians, would be appointed. But our main focus is on those what we call CHINS cases, which are typically neglect cases.
So the court refers a child, to you guys, and you're supposed to come up with a volunteer to do what?
Well, so actually to back up a little bit, DCF, the Department of Human Services, will come in and investigate a family, and if they find that the court needs to get involved, or if there needs to be some oversight, whether it's the child being removed from the home or the child staying in their home, but with some court supervision. So once that decision is made and a case is filed in court, then the court does reach out to our program and ask for a GAL to be appointed. And in Vermont, by law, every one of those cases needs to have a guardian ad litem appointed.
Wow.
Also in Vermont, we rely completely on volunteers. And so our program is focused on recruiting volunteers, training volunteers, supporting them while they work on these cases. And that volunteer is the child's voice in court. So they advocate for the child's best interest. And my take is that they're the only one really truly advocating for the child's best interest. You've got the state, who primarily is in line with what DCF is wanting to do. You've got the parents and their own attorneys. And the child does have his or her own attorney, but depending on the age of the child, they might advocate for what the child actually wants. And that might not be the same as what's in the child's best interest. So the advocates are very caring, compassionate, hardworking people who the child can come to rely on to be their voice in court, to look out for their best interest, and to alert the court when things aren't going the way they should be going.
Okay. So you, Russ, you're one of the advocates.
Yes.
How did you get into this?
Actually, I saw an ad in the paper looking for volunteers to be guardian ad litems. I was working over in New Hampshire at the time when a friend of mine was going through a divorce hearing, and they had a guardian appointed over in New Hampshire to them. So that's where I kind of got the idea of what it was. And so I checked with I went and filled out an application, went through the training, and the rest is history. I did it for a couple of years and realized that when I was working it was hard.
Yeah.
Because I was showing up to court, and the court would be rescheduled, and I'd lose a day of vacation. So when I retired, I went back and took the training over again a couple of years ago now. I think maybe a little over 2 years ago now.
So now you have a new career path.
Well,
Essentially.
I just simply like to be able to give back to my community.
Yeah.
I mean, the community has been good to me overall. And I just feel like if I can help, I don't want to get too much into my past, but I had some rough times in my own history. And so if I can help the kids work through what's going on in their lives, I feel like I'm making a difference.
Right. So a child is referred to you. You make a match between a volunteer and the child.
Yeah, typically there are some guardians who will take specific types of cases, but primarily it's if someone is available to take a case, they're pretty open to working with the child or the family if they're able to. And at that point, the guardian is appointed by the court, and they have the authority to speak with teachers, important people in the child's life, and it's their role to really get to know the child and the child's needs. Guardian is required to attend every court hearing. They also attend team meetings with DCF, and they get to know the family and the family's individual circumstances, so they can know how to best advocate for the child.
It's a really important role.
It is. And it's, unfortunately, we have a lot of children who are involved in the court system,
Yeah.
and we just don't have enough volunteers who can meet that need right now. So we're really looking for people who are willing to take that time. In the past, we've typically had retirees because it can be, obviously, you have to be responsible and we have to rely on you
Right.
to show up in court when it's scheduled. But there is a bit more flexibility now, whether positive or not, because of COVID.
Yeah.
A lot of the court appearances are done remotely via WebEx, and so you don't have those old situations where you spend an entire day waiting in the courthouse
Right.
only to get a case rescheduled. You can just pop on and pop off.
So now you can get beamed in.
Exactly. You get beamed in, whether good or bad.
Yeah. I'm not the biggest fan of Zoom or Zoom equivalents.
Sure, and
And I also recognize how useful it is.
yeah, there's definitely pros and cons, especially in the Vermont winters.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and when you
Exactly.
it does open us up to having more types of volunteers we can be a bit more flexible.
And certainly now that more people are working from home, they have more flexibility,
Sure. Yeah.
which is really neat. Who is it that you want to be a volunteer?
We need someone who is obviously compassionate,
Yeah.
who has a desire to help children. We work with, of course, all different types of families, people who come from different backgrounds, different cultural, political, religious differences. So a GAL has to be non-judgmental, unbiased, and compassionate for the child's needs. They also need to be responsible.
Right.
Unfortunately, I keep saying Chin's case, we call him an abuse and neglect case. I can fall back on Chin's if it's helpful. But unfortunately, in a Chin's case, you'll get a lot of turnover with attorneys, DCF workers. But ideally, the one person who's consistent throughout the entire case is their guardian ad litem. And
That's their one personal contact, and that is so important.
and you really, I mean, Russell can say you develop a bond with these children, and hopefully they come to learn that they can rely on the guardian
Yeah.
to be their voice in court, to be honest with them about what's going on, age appropriate, of course,
Of course.
you know, so we just want someone who's going to show up. And really, anyone can be a GAL.
Yeah.
But not just anyone.
I know,
It's
of course.
It's a hard job, and it's not for everyone, and we understand that, but it's a very important job, which makes it interesting that we rely completely on volunteers to do the work.
Yeah, it's sort of really surprising that a program that is mandated by law, you have to have it, is volunteer driven.
It is surprising.
Yeah.
But when compared to other states that have paid guardians ad litem, at least the data that we have shows that GALs who are volunteers actually result with have better outcomes for the children.
That actually isn't surprising.
And yeah, it's, you know, that the internal motivation is there. They're doing
Yeah.
it out of the kindness of their heart. And you just have the most phenomenal group of people that you can work
Yeah.
with.
And you have people who, as you were saying earlier, have worked through a lot of things in your own life.
Well,
You've
I can-
survived to be a ripe old age.
Yeah,
But you
we don't have
bring-
time to go through those weeds.
But you bring a ton of experience with you.
That's correct.
And the path that you've walked through your own life, I'm sure has many twists and turns, as it does for many of us.
And as Leann said, when we go into a home or we go into a child's life,
Yeah,
I may not agree with how that child's being raised, but
Right.
that's not my place.
right.
All I have to do is make sure that the best interest of that child is being met.
Yeah,
And sometimes I have to call her up and say, help me.
yeah.
And that's a great resource that we have, is to have somebody like Leann that when I'm struggling with something on a case,
Right.
all of us call her up and talk to her. And it's and if she's busy, there's other coordinators that we've learned that we can have access to and work with.
Yeah, that kind of support is so important because going into homes, you never know what you're going to find. And sometimes it's pretty hairy, and sometimes you have to deal with things right in the moment. And sometimes you just know there's something that's not right, but everything on the surface seems cool, calm, and perfectly collected. But you know there's something under there.
What I try to do, and what I really am working with closely with DCF, is to make home visits with them. So if we go together,
Right.
there's two of us,
Yeah.
and then they have their job to do, and I have mine, and sometimes we'll separate and go different ways in the
Yeah.
home. But
Yeah.
there's also times that we'll travel together.
Right.
We can talk about other cases, and it seems
Yeah.
to be
That's actually a good way of working. It also makes DCF really step up and say, okay, we're working this as a team, let's really work it. And they're pretty overloaded too, so
And I
it
think
can
it's,
be hard.
despite that, and of course, we always encourage them to do their visits however works best for them, but it's also important to remember that a guardian ad litem is not working with or for DCF.
Right.
Of course, everyone who's involved in this child's life should be working together. They have the same common goal, which is to find a safe, a permanent home as quickly as possible, ideally with their own family.
Yeah.
But, you know.
That's hard.
The guardian's there for the child, only the child. And regardless of what DCF, they may disagree or agree with what
Yeah.
DCF wants, but.
And the DCF worker does not have that luxury.
Right, so you're
Yeah.
completely
Yeah.
independent, unbiased, and.
Yeah.
But of course, you develop a close working relationship with the FSWs, but the goal, that's to reach the goal, which
Mhm.
is a good outcome for the child.
Yeah.
but it's also working with the child's lawyer.
Right.
And there's times that I have been a different opinion of what should happen to the child than what the lawyer has.
I'm sure.
So, and it depends on the circumstances
Yeah.
in the case. So you just advocate your point of view. It's up to the lawyer to do what they have to do, because they have a different role.
Mm-hmm.
It's similar to the same between the guardian and the family service
Right.
worker. So it's, when I first took the training years ago, it was kind of explained to me that I'm kind of like eyes and ears for the judge.
Mm-hmm.
I'm to bring data and information that I find,
Right.
so that it helps the judge make a good decision
Yes.
for what's going on with the child.
Yeah, and it's a really cumbersome and complicated system, and it was probably set up with the best of intentions, but it plays out sometimes in a way that's really hard to follow, for a start, or even to think, why is it working this way or not working?
Yeah.
Yeah. How much do you have to deal with things like bail, and how many of the young people are in jail?
If they're in, I've never had to go to a jail to see a child. I've been to jail to see a parent.
Sure.
But as far as the child goes, I don't think they're ever. There's times that,
Mhm.
for the safety of the child, they might be family service workers sitting with them at the jailhouse
Right.
or in the hospital. Right, there'll be times they have and there's people there
Yes.
keeping them safe. And I've gone to the hospital and see some of my children when they're
Yeah.
first taken into custody, and then the work goes on to try to find a place for them to be.
Custody being not police custody, but DCF custody. And
Yeah, I'm
actually,
sorry, yeah.
in Vermont, there was a locked, secured juvenile facility, Woodside, but it has since been closed. So there
Yeah,
aren't any in
Vermont in many ways struggles because we have so few resources for young people.
Mm.
We don't have much for older people either, but we're a resource poor state, working hard at trying to change that. But it is tough, particularly if you have connections with groups, families that would really benefit from the mental health system.
I was talking with a family service worker the other day when we was going to see one of our kids, and he mentioned to me that part of the problem with the resources in Vermont for having facilities is the workers, right? We don't have a lot of people in our state.
Right.
So the pool to pull in support people for running these facilities is kind of complicated also. So that's another point that I hadn't thought of, because I was bringing up, why can't we do this? And
Yeah, I mean, that's probably a discussion that we should certainly have, but a different day. I'd really like to get into that discussion. But the bottom line right now is that there aren't too many resources, and you're in a position of having the opportunity, actually, to be very creative.
and what do you mean by
Well,
as far as
You're representing or working with a child.
Yes.
You are their sort of voice in a legal system. You get to say what would be in their best interests.
that's correct?
And you don't have to be restrained by what isn't here. You can still say what needs to be here.
I do that quite frequently.
Yeah, that's what I mean. You can be really creative there. And those who are officials in the system don't have that luxury in anything like the same way. They are really tied into the system, unfortunately.
Yeah.
That it's not by choice, but it's true.
I hate to say, but it is what it is, right?
That's
that,
right.
that saying is I don't
Yeah.
like, but it
Yeah.
comes true.
But you're not limited by that.
No.
And you can say, this is X, what would really be in his or her best interests, this whole list of resources. And maybe then the system can think of some other options.
Yeah, I don't know what the answers are. I really,
No.
I know what the problems can be.
Yeah,
And so I just worked to the best of my ability to provide the kids stability through what I say I got one child that's had 4 DCF workers. She's had the same lawyer through the whole process. But it's just every time you lose a family service worker, you fall backwards in the process because
Right.
now they've got to catch up with what's going on.
yes. So you are the one constant.
That's what I strive to do, yes.
Yeah. It's a long-term commitment.
We do ask that our volunteers commit to at least 2 years.
Yeah.
And they
My
do.
term's up.
He's not going anywhere.
No, I enjoy the kids.
Yeah. How many volunteers do you have?
In Orleans County,
Yeah.
we have about 8.
How many
we're-
would you like?
I'd like 20, 50 if we can, but I think 20 would get us to a place where we're a bit more comfortable and the caseloads are manageable. Any volunteer chooses how many cases he or she takes. So you have some that'll take maybe 2 cases at a time, and some like Russell who will take 15 at a time. It depends on what you're able to do.
Yeah.
But we do try to not overwhelm our GALs with cases. It's just we don't have that luxury right now. And we desperately need people who are willing to be trained to do this work,
Yeah.
because you don't need any particular type of background. You don't need to have a special education or any special training going into it. You need to be able to pass a background check. You need to be able,
Sure.
you have to have a valid driver's license and be willing to complete the training that we provide. But we rely on average, everyday citizens who are just willing to help out these children.
And if somebody listening to this thinks, that sort of sounds interesting. I like kids. I would like young people to have the life they deserve to have and be a part of that. How do they get involved?
Well, they can apply online or find more information online at www.vermontjudiciary.org/GAL. Vermont Judiciary.
Yeah.
And then you can link there to the GAL page or
You can just Google Guardian ad litem.
in Vermont, right? You can apply online,
Yeah.
or you could find out more information there. I have a phone number. I can.
We can do that at the end,
Yeah.
definitely, and put that up.
Sure, great.
On the video, yeah.
And we offer training 3 times a year. So our next training begins May 8th, and it's 3 full days of training
Mhm.
on 3 consecutive Mondays. Our next training doesn't begin until September. It'll start on September 11th.
Mhm.
But we provide training, we provide a mentor, so that when you're going into it, you're not working on your own, you're
Mhm.
working with an experienced guardian for a while, however long you're comfortable. And of course, us coordinators are always there as a resource for our volunteers. And we just have a fabulous group of volunteers who are willing to help each other out too.
Yeah. And I presume the volunteers all know each other.
Yeah, I mean, we have meetings together. A lot of them
Yeah.
are virtual. We're getting into in-person now
Sure.
too, but
Well, like the other day when I went down to Bennington to see
Yeah.
one of my kiddos down there, the family service worker was stopping in at the same place to see another kid
Mhm.
for a fellow worker, and we had another GAL that was assigned to this person.
Sure.
And we got permission from that GAL for me to just put eyes on and say, how you doing? And not that
Right.
I'm going to get involved in that
No, no.
case, but it's like,
Mhm.
I saw her, she's looking good. You know,
Yeah.
asked if there was anything she wanted her GAL to know, and
Sure.
she didn't. So it was just, so that helps the other person,
Absolutely.
because we really try to see our kids once a month. And when you got 15 to 20 cases, that sometimes puts you at
That's a lot.
25 kids, because some cases have more than one
Yeah.
child, it makes it difficult to get out and coordinate and see
Mhm.
everybody.
But certainly a newer volunteer would not start out with
No.
that number.
no, they wouldn't.
I don't want to scare anybody.
No,
No,
you start out
you
slow.
have a new career path.
Well,
They wouldn't even start out with their own case. They would work with another
Yeah.
GAL. And so we want to make sure that they're going into it as comfortable as can be, and that they've got the resources that they need to be successful.
Yeah. And I presume you're looking for real diversity in...
That would be wonderful. I mean, yes, we are. Because we work with a diverse population.
Right.
It only enriches the program if we can have people from all walks of life.
Mhm.
And because everyone provides their own perspective too. You come with your own life experiences, and that can help guide you.
So somebody listening to this who thinks, well, they might not be interested in me being a volunteer because I'm gay or I'm lesbian.
Absolutely not. No, that we would encourage anyone to apply. We welcome
Mhm.
anyone to apply.
and that's what I was referring to earlier about, say, somebody has different values or different ways of doing things.
Mhm.
You just need to be there for what you got to be there for, and not take that into consideration whatsoever.
Right.
If that makes sense.
But it does help when you have people who have had shared life experiences.
Hmm.
They're working with the children.
Yeah. How about people who have physical challenges? Is there a way for adaptive?
Yes, so all of our training is done remotely,
Mm-hmm.
and they can appear in court remotely. So
Yeah.
as long as they have a valid driver's license, then they're
Cool.
encouraged to apply. And we would welcome, I mean, like I said, it's
Yeah.
the more diverse we are, the better we can be, and the stronger we can be as a program.
Yes. And, I mean, Vermont is obviously, because we're a predominantly white state, that I'm sure is an issue.
It is, that's something that we've struggled with, and we've been trying to get creative on ways that we can attract volunteers who are more diverse. And it's a goal of ours. It's something that we're working towards, but I would just say to anyone who's considering applying, we would love to have you. And it's,
Yeah, so really, it's a broad question. Would you like to work with kids in a way that can be so rewarding
mhm.
and challenging?
And challenging, yeah.
I mean, let's not minimize that.
No.
Because a lot of the behavior that you see with the children is defense for survival.
Absolutely.
That's how I look at it. It's all about how am I going to get through tomorrow, and
Yes.
they've learned these ways of surviving, and I have to remind myself all the time that I need to try to help them with that process.
Right. That there are other ways of getting through life, but we understand you're doing what you do because it was adaptive.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yep. And they're just children.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I have a child that's maybe 4 weeks old right now, and I have one that just turned 18 that just got out of the system. So that's
Working with a 4-week-old child is differently challenging.
well, I don't have to.
Obviously, the child is in the context of
Yeah,
something
well,
else there. Yeah.
I'm working more with the foster parents, the
Yes.
parents, that aspect of it, not so
Sure.
much as the child, but I still am watching for the best interest of that infant.
Right.
You might not be able to have a conversation with that infant, but you can learn a lot about the
Absolutely.
infant by observing the interaction that he has with his mother, father,
Yeah.
and observing how the interaction is with a foster parent. Oftentimes they're placed with a grandparent, aunt.
Hmm.
We call those kinship placements.
Yeah. Although that would be a fun one to work with.
Yeah. We're partial to babies.
Yeah.
Right. The joy of working with a baby that you don't have to then take care
Yeah.
of all of the time. That's the good part of it. Speaking of an 18-year-old, I mean, clearly at 18, they're, quote, aged out of the system. Do they lose your support at that point, or are you encouraging a way of staying connected? You've been important in that person's life.
If I am no longer legally
Right.
through the courts assigned
Yeah.
to that person, but I would, if they called me up, I would never turn them away, and I would always be there to give them whatever I could do for them.
Yeah.
Refer them to something or
Yeah.
whatever it is.
Because if you've been the consistent person in somebody's life, and it could have been for several years in this case,
It was 2 or 3, yes.
then you're important.
Mhm.
And that would be really wonderful if you
But to-
could maintain that.
To watch that person work through these issues with
Yeah.
the services that are provided for them, the struggles they went through,
Right.
and then to see where they're at today is priceless. That's kind of why I do it.
Yeah.
And it's not uncommon
No,
for
I'm sure.
them to stay in touch with their GAL, and it's totally up to the individual,
Mhm.
the GAL, if they want to maintain that contact. Like as Russell said, your role is over,
Mhm.
but that doesn't mean that your relationship has to be over.
Right.
But that's up to the individual guardian.
But I'm not going to reach out to them.
No.
But
But they know where to reach you.
if they wanted to get a hold of me, they can.
Yeah. You're not invisible.
No?
You're also really good at recruiting. This today came about because we were at the same breakfast.
Yeah.
And Russ came up and said, "Hey, you need to." Oh, that's a great idea.
Yep.
Well,
Which
I called Leann and she got right in contact with you.
Yeah. Oh,
You know,
yeah.
it was, this all
yes.
happened.
Yeah, we need
Follow.
GAL.
This all happened since Saturday. So
That's right. It
Yeah.
was good breakfast too.
Very good breakfast in my mind.
But yeah. So probably the more public you can be about this, I think a lot of people just don't know.
Yeah.
They really don't. And it sounds intimidating. I mean, that's a fancy title, guardian ad litem.
Yeah. It's, but really, if you're an advocate.
Right.
You're an advocate who's just there to
Yeah.
represent the child's best interest, to try to help make the process turn out the best way that it can for the child, and so that the child, at least to some extent, has an adult there
Mhm.
who's looking out for them and, as we said before, is their voice.
Yeah. Have any of the kids that you've worked with ever considered becoming a guardian themselves, or helped you recruit more, the ones who really have found it I mean, they're the best spokespeople
They
for
are.
this service.
I haven't.
I don't know of it any.
Yeah,
No.
you never know.
No.
It really might be a way of recruiting.
Sure. You just have to be 21 years old.
So it's another of those, I'm legal at 18,
Yeah.
and obviously there's good reasons for a level of maturity.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So what else do you think somebody needs to know who's really considering this?
Patience. A lot of times you need patience with the child because they're struggling. They're going through first off, they're going through sometimes adolescence, right?
Mhm.
Their
That's
bodies
stressful
their
anyway.
bodies change. Well, right, for anybody that doesn't even have, it's, all this stuff takes place, and you have to take all that in consideration.
And just realizing how traumatic it can be just by being involved in the court system. Setting aside all of the trauma that a lot of these children have
Right.
experienced in their life before even reaching this point, but some of these children are taken out of their homes, and that is a very hard thing for a child to have to go through.
Yes, it's a
And-
hard process for anybody to go through.
Yeah, and there's not going to be an immediate, let's fix this right now. There's a lot of challenges along the way. You want to make sure that if they're taken out of the home, if their home is found to be unsafe, for them to return, you have to make sure that the home is safe or good enough
Yeah.
to be returned. The court system, unfortunately, is pretty backed up, so you don't always get into court quickly, and cases don't always move quickly. You
Yeah.
talked about the resources before. There's, we need more resources. That's an area where we can improve, and sometimes that can be a roadblock. So there are roadblocks along the way, and the system isn't a perfect way. Ideally, everyone would get in a circle, put their heads together. We would find a safe home for this family to live in where it's, they can stay with their
Mhm.
parents. It wouldn't be done in a courtroom. There wouldn't be the need to separate these families, but it's
The
imperfect. We're doing the
restorative
best.
justice model.
Yeah, so we're, as Russell said, I think patience is a big piece of it.
Yeah.
But
Well, and we have a lot of kids that are being transferred out of state to facilities in that in itself is a challenging time for the families.
It's a challenging time for the kid. They've lost everything,
that's-
including their home base.
Yes, it's
And that's certainly not a perfect solution. And it's understandable based on the lack of resources here. But that is so tough. Can you follow up with a kid who's transferred out in that way?
I have all the access I need with that child.
Yeah.
And I was just having a conversation because I have a person that's going out of state, probably as far away as I've had, but I even have abilities to where they will send me to that location to meet face to face, and I plan on doing that at least once, for maybe twice, to see how things are going at that
Mhm.
place. It's a new facility that I've never dealt with
Huh.
before, so yeah.
That's good. But that again is a level of your commitment too.
People aren't expected to do that.
Right.
So I don't want people to get nervous saying they're going to have to travel the country.
No, I think that sounds really good.
But you do have to travel the state.
Yeah.
I know.
But it's and individual. Each case is different too. So
Right.
you may for one and not another.
Mhm.
It depends on the circumstances, the situation, and the conversations I have with Leann.
Right. So somebody who's listening, who's beginning to get a little interested, they would start off with the 3 days of training after they've applied.
So after they interview,
Yeah.
so after they submit an application, we do a background check, we do
Mhm,
reference
sure.
checks. And then, yeah, they decide to do the pre-service training the 3 consecutive days.
And then you'd start them off gently with a partner to begin with,
Mhm.
and then a couple of, quote, lightweight cases that are, or are they going to get straight in?
They would probably jump into whichever case
Was the next
comes
up.
Yeah, and that's oftentimes a pretty good learning experience. So,
Oh, yes.
what better time to work on a complicated case than with an experienced GAL who's appointed
Right.
right there with you. And that mentorship could last as long as that person likes. So sometimes the mentorship will last a couple months.
Mhm.
Sometimes it'll last a year. It just depends on the comfort level.
Yeah. And then as you gain in competence and experience, you move on out.
Mhm.
Obviously, you weren't flying straight in.
Well, I had done it previously,
Right.
right? So
Yeah.
10 years ago, I worked with some children through this program.
Mhm.
And then I just had to bow out. Then when I retired a couple of years ago, I got in contact with the coordinator at the time.
Yeah.
And went through the process. I filled out the application, I had an interview, then I went through the training all over again.
Mhm.
And the training was similar, but there's always some
Probably
changes.
differences,
And
yeah.
as time goes on, that changes a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, and what is considered a norm changes too. What people look for, what we learn along the way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you do the training?
The coordinators do the training, so we all do it together as a
Okay.
state system. So actually, if someone who lives in Orleans County were to apply for and start training,
Mhm.
they would attend training with other new GALs throughout the state. And not all of the presentations, we have different modules, so not all of the presentations are done by us coordinators.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's someone from DCF, sometimes it's a panel of youth who come in to speak about their experiences in the system. Or it might be a panel of seasoned GALs.
Right.
It's a mix of things, but it is conducted by us coordinators.
Yeah. And clearly when this goes out, you A, don't live in Newport, and B, you're sort of new to the area.
Right.
But you live right here, and we all know you.
Yeah, well,
So are you available if people want to ask you questions?
Absolutely.
Actually, they'll just ask you anyway, won't
No,
they? Everybody knows where to find you.
well, I'm pretty well known, I guess.
Yeah, you are.
And
And that's a good thing.
And they can always ask me questions. I
Yes.
can provide my cell phone
Yeah,
number.
that would be great, so that people do have a way of contacting.
Absolutely.
Is there anything else in the last few minutes that you think it's important for people to know about the program or about volunteering?
Well, I just want to say that it's such an important job, and we really do need people. And
Yeah.
if you're thinking about applying, please, you can just give us a call. We can talk about it. As I said before, anyone could be a GAL.
Mhm.
You don't have to have a particular background. We provide the training. In fact, we don't want a particular background.
Right.
We want all different types of people. It's hard work, but it's really rewarding, and I can't think of a better opportunity to make a huge difference in a child's life and to be
Right.
a stable person in a child's life.
Okay. And a last comment?
Oh, I think I've said quite a bit.
Do you
No.
enjoy it?
Well, as far as GALs?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, no,
absolutely.
it's
That's what I want. Sign up now will do.
Wow. Yeah, it's rewarding in its
Yeah.
own way, but yet I'm glad we have the resources like Leann.
Oh, sure.
Because when I'm struggling with a case, sometimes we've been on the phone for 45 minutes talking
Yeah.
about it.
It's great.
And she never tells me I can't call her.
No.
So
Yeah.
just having that resource tells me that anybody can
That's great.
do this, if I can.
Yeah. Well, thank you both for coming.
Thank
And
you so much for
I
having
really
us.
hope that a lot of people contact you, because this is a worthwhile program. It's a really important service.
Yeah. Well, thank you for letting us
Oh,
Thank
hear
you.
and
Thank
talk
you
about
for-
that.
Okay.